Hello, everyone. This is Peter Desmond Kelly, host of Peter the Healer, your celestial broadcaster, the place for great interviews where I ask the questions nobody else does. And for today, I have an incredible person who I find quite incredible in terms of everything that he has followed through with in terms of his own personal spiritual journey and what he has to offer. Today, he'll be coming to talk about his book, but also many other wisdoms, kernels of wisdom that he has picked up in an incredible career of personal findings of all kinds of things. So hold on, we're going to meet him in a moment. His name is Dr. Gabriel Cousens, Into the Nothing, his book, A Spiritual Autobiography.
Hello. Hi. Is this Peter the Healer?
Yes. No, actually, I'm the audio engineer for the show, Peter the Healer, your celestial broadcaster.
Where is Peter the Healer?
That's a good question. I really don't know. I've been trying for the last 10 minutes trying to reach him, but he's not answering.
Have you tried tuning into 528 Hertz, the love frequency?
No, that's a good idea. I'll give it a try. Let's see what happens. Hey, you know what? I think I'm getting some
Radio Noise.
Hello? Anybody out there?
DJ e produtor brasileiro Rod Novaes.
We have Dr. Gabriel Cousens on the line. Hopefully, we're going to get a visual in a moment.
Okay, wait a second. I got it.
Administration of here we go. Here's the man. And you're taller than I am. I'm going to have to do something about this. This is not fair. There, that's right. All in the aim of equality and balance. And I'm telling you, when I got the kit, the press kit, I said to myself, oh my God, it's going to take me just an hour to read all of your accomplishments. How did you pack all that into, you're 77 years old now? And you look, my goodness, you look like 40. How did you put all that into your life? I'm going to read a little short bio in a moment, and welcome to the show. I mean, I'm honored to have you on. Wow.
If you want me to answer it now or later or what?
Or you can answer it now if you'd like before I read your intro.
The answer is I never think about it. I just did. If you think about it, you get overwhelmed.
I was overwhelmed just reading your press kit. So I'm going to read right now that press kit. Where is it? I'll bring it up. Just the on-air intro that Missy was kind enough to forward to me. Okay, Gabriel, I hope I'm saying correctly, Gabriel or is it Gabriel?
Yeah.
Gabriel?
Oh, well, it's a French. That's the French speaking. I call it Gabriel.
Okay.
Gabriel is also good. Actually, it's very poetic. I kind of like it.
Gabriel. Yeah. Well, I'm from Quebec, Canada, so we're French here. Gabriel Cousens.
Cousin. That's
Cousin.
Cousin. That's also French.
French.
That's also French.
Gabriel Cousin, MD, Into the Nothing. Okay, so a spiritual autobiography is about the wild, courageous, adventurous, mystical life that led to his spiritual liberation. This book, destined to be a spiritual classic, takes us through his unique process of spiritual awakening along several paths. The yogic way of life, including 7 years immersed in a globally traveling ashram. The Torah, most specifically the Kabbalistic and Essene teachings that are the most mystical aspects of Judaism, and the Native American tradition, where he braved the extreme spiritual trials of initiation to becoming a Native American sun dancer, eagle dancer, and spirit dancer. All of these aided him in his quest into becoming a Native American sun dancer. I just said that all of these aided him in his quest into the nothing, where he experienced his conscious beyond the perceived restriction of mind and body, and the state where the true freedom lies. Today, this 77-year-old world-renowned holistic physician, spiritual mystic, rabbi, yogi, psychiatrist, family therapist, vital at any age advocate, yay! That's when I stood up and cheered. I'm only 10 years your junior. Humanitarian and peace ambassador, walks the planet in the state of eternal presence, seeing the emanating light from all things, and yet living in the very real world where his good works and spiritual guidance change lives daily. He lives, as he says, in the world between nothing, the world beyond time, and something, the temporal world, and experiences a fully integrated life in multiple dimensions, happy, joyful, grateful, loving, and peaceful without any exterior reason, non-causal, because that is the nature of the primordial consciousness. And his mission is to bring the holistic liberation way to anyone who wishes to experience this freedom for themselves. The holistic liberation way includes Dr. Cousens' unique teachings of spiritual nutrition, the 6 foundations, and 7-fold peace. We're almost finished. I mean, if you guys think this is a lot, you should see the press kit that I got. This is about maybe that small a portion of the entire thing, and I'm sure there's more. Among his myriad other works include Dr. Cousens' 13 internationally best-selling books, pioneering a natural way to cure type 2 diabetes in 21 days, becoming one of the foremost spiritual professionals on the authentic rising of the Kundalini energy and healing of the occasional imbalances resulting from Kundalini awakening, establishing humanitarian programs in 42 nations, and emerging as one of the world's leading proponents for a healthy, natural, vegan, alive food diet. Welcome, Dr. Gabriel Cousens, to the show today to share his journey into the nothing.
Very good. Good.
Incredible.
Can you hear me okay?
I hear you perfectly. Yeah,
Perfect.
you're good. You're good. And you're, as I said before, you're looking good. It must be the Israeli climate.
I don't know about that, but okay.
It's pretty nice. Where I am, it's minus 30 as we speak, or it's approaching minus 30 Celsius. Yeah, it's a cold one today.
Wow.
Arctic vortex that's come in. So I have a whole bunch of questions here that I want to ask you, and Missy had sent me some to ask you, but I have others I'd love to ask you too, if you don't mind. But let's start
anything.
with the list that I have. Yeah, you look at the peak of health right now. Totally. So we're going to. What is? Sorry.
I did my 1,200 push-ups today, so I'm feeling pretty good.
That's the key. Okay, everyone out there, we don't need to listen anymore. 1,200 push-ups is all you have to do, and you're going to look like Dr. Cousens. Great. I try to do 30, and I'm struggling. My goodness. Okay, that's great. All right, here's the first question for you. What is the holistic way of life that leads to spiritual liberation?
Okay, great question. The key is it's multi-leveled. We take care of our physical body so we have enough energy and clarity to move into the emotional, mental, and spiritual realms. That's part of it. The other part is meditating. I meditate 2 hours a day, and I've been doing that for years and years and years. I mean, it used to be 6 hours when I was living in India, but that continually expands your mind. When you're in the nothing, there's a tremendous re-energization. That's the key. So the way of life is taking care of yourself physically, eating in a good way, and then I do things like yoga every day and breathing exercises and obviously physical exercises, service and charity. It opens your heart. It's a connection. It's really important. I work with lots of people all over the world, supporting them. That's as a teacher. Service and charity is a little different because you're working with groups like Native American groups or working in Africa or Mexico, different things like that. So teaching is really at the level I teach, which is that heart connection, keeps you young. Okay. And then meditating, and then keeping the Kundalini spiritual energy kind of activated. So those are the kind of the bigger picture of the way of life. Another thing is, it's kind of subtle, but working with people of all different ages, including younger people, because there's a lot to energetic. There's a certain level of energetic exchange that's also good, but mostly it's my own and love. You know, I've been in a relationship here for 21 years, and that love is very important. Sacred relationship is very important. I'm also connected to my kids and my grandchildren. So all that, just that love, that sacred relationship with the total family, it makes a difference. And it keeps you young. And then mentally, you're thinking young, which is really important. You become your, in a sense, your youth when you're thinking that way. So they all play a role.
I've got a quote here from the book that I'd love you to elaborate on. All I learned from life has come from meditation, sacred relationships, and playing football.
American football, yeah. Well, as I was growing up, actually, I started playing football when I was 10 years old. And what happened is it took me beyond my normal level of consciousness. So as I extended myself, I found myself going into the unknown, into the nothing in certain ways. Not like we do in meditation, but so that was always a turn on. But I learned a lot from the experience of pushing beyond limits. Sacred relationship is another way of going beyond limits because you're opening your heart, you're facing intimacy and the risk in intimacy and going into the unknown. So in a sacred relationship, you don't. It's not for stability. It's for the ability to choose to open your heart and see what happens. Jumping into the unknown. So that's part of the spiritual path, because that's a precursor, in a sense, for merging into the divine, the big unknown. That's the biggest thing that's, biggest to know, but it's also scary for lots of people. And I write in my book how I had my time of being a little bit of scared, like what's going to happen as I go into the nothing. And then you get through it. And one reason I put it in the book is to let people know they get through it. And then meditation on a regular basis takes you beyond. Now, I didn't have to, once football is over, how do you get, beyond meditation? So that's, and then meditation teaches you the inner world that you can't read about. It's because it's experiential. You disappear. I mean, whoever thought you would disappear meditating? I didn't. Just what happened. And so then you have to face disappearing.
By nothing, I mean, you disappear into nothing.
The subtlety is when you're meditating, you can have a quiet mind, but there's still a you having a quiet mind. And what I'm talking about is there's another level where you go beyond the mind, and there's still a you going beyond the mind. And then ultimately, there's a you that disappears. As it teaches in the Torah, you can't know God and live. Well, what that means is to know God, emerge into the nothing. You have to disappear. You have to kind of die into the nothing, and that's how that progresses. Otherwise, how do you emerge?
Question, one of my own questions: how would you define God?
I don't. It's too intellectual for me. It's enough to experience it without boundaries. The minute we think about it, we contract it, and that's the key, I think.
Yeah, that's a big conundrum that a lot of people are in. They're so caught up with the definition and the name.
It's not a problem for me because I'm not interested in defining it and limiting it and putting God in a box. God is so beyond that. Yeah.
I get you. That's beautiful. So I've got a question here. Describe your spiritual path. You've already started to describe it. Would you add anything else? It's not ending, I assume. It's eternal.
Two big pieces that were turning points. Well, three. My path actually started when I was one, when I had TB, 1943. That's a death sentence. I survived, but I had to deal with the issue of death. And then later my brother died, and then my father and my mother, everybody died. And every time I kept being confronted by, what is this death? What's the soul? So I was, from age one, I was asking that question. And then when I was 33, same year my mother died, I received what we call Shakti Prapti from Swami Muktananda, which is the energetic transmission that can awaken your spiritual. In the West, we call Ruach HaKodesh. But once that was the next big phase, and once that was awakened, it took me really beyond the mind. And it also opened up my experience of what we call the inner anatomy, spiritual anatomy, the chakra system. I didn't even know what that was, but I saw all the chakras. I saw the flows of the energies. Like, wow, I saw all the petals in exact as it was. I've never read a book on it, but it's like I looked it up afterwards. But that was the biggest spiritual piece. And then we were only recommended to meditate an hour a day. Swami Muktananda recommended, but I ended up meditating 6 hours a day, chanting 4.5 hours a day, working as a doctor another 4 hours, taking care of my family, my 2 kids, and my relationship was like, and so that kind of pushes you to your limits, which is good. And that's spiritual life. Spiritual life isn't just meditating in a cave.
There's a
It's
lot of work,
in all levels.
a lot of work. What would you say is the natural way of living that leads to liberation?
Well, all these things. It's how you're eating, how you're walking, so to speak, in your life. So it's not living separate from life. It's living within the context of your life as a father, as a grandfather, as a husband, as an athlete. But it's experiencing God in all those ways. The real key is to experience God in everything you do. And that's what transforms. Another part of that key is whatever is happening to you, how to turn it into a spiritual experience where you're elevated. You're never saying, poor me. You're saying, wow, what an opportunity to grow spiritually. So there's an attitude of all life is a teaching. All life is a spiritual teaching to help us grow. And so that's how it becomes a total way of life, whatever part of our life we're doing.
Hmm. And what role does Kundalini play in this, and what is Shaktipat?
Shaktipat. Kundalini is, in a sense, the divine energy of the universe. It's described lots of different ways. We call it the Holy Spirit. Okay, we call it the Ruach HaKodesh in the Hebrew tradition. It's the spirit. It expands our consciousness and takes us to the heart of God. And then Shaktipat is the energy, the spiritual energy from a spiritual teacher that can awaken that energy. So I received it from Swami Muktananda. Now he empowered me to then awaken it in other people. So that's what Shaktipat is. It's the awakening of the Kundalini energy.
Okay, and what does it mean to be a wild, liberated mystic? Is that you?
Well, I don't like labels so much, but the answer is that's how I live. It's a turn on. It's a way of living fully alive. And that's the beauty of it. Just like experiencing God in all the different ways, living fully alive is like it's a whole way of being where you're just turned on to the divine in your life.
And this question, many people are certainly into this. It's the multi-dimensional aspect. The question being, what is it like to live in multiple worlds?
This is it's a shamanic way of thinking. The shaman is the walker between the worlds. So we have the physical world. The shaman often walks then in the astral plane. You're doing healings in the astral plane, and I certainly explain in the book as different beings would materialize. That's the astral world, but then that's not the highest world. The next level is the world of the mind, pure mind, and then finally the world of God. So now here's the thing that's important. We don't focus on one of those worlds. It's experiencing them all simultaneously. You and I are sitting here, eye to eye. It's like I'm seeing the divine in you. It's good, it's fun. So it's simultaneous. I'm in my physical body. You and I are connected on an emotional level, but also a spiritual level. And it's having the awareness to experience them all at the same time. And I'm going to add one more to that. It's past, present, and future simultaneously. We've heard about the now, be in the present. At the next level, I talk about the eternal presence, where we're having experience the past, the present, and the future simultaneously. That's a whole different level of awareness. So it's time, but also all the different spaces.
Fascinating. And the next question.
Wild. It's wild. It's not,
Wild. That's the word. Wild and liberating at the same time. Clarify for me the advantage of your multicultural spiritual path to liberation as an acknowledged yogi, sun dancer, eagle dancer, and ordained rabbi. I would also add psychiatrist and family therapist to that. Should I? You know, that's, I would assume you cannot just disconnect from that. You
right.
developed a practice, family therapist, psychiatrist. Was that where you started? You had some clinics. You were in charge of some different places
Well,
in California, I understand.
yes, yes. You know, going to medical school, living in central Harlem, working with all kinds of different people, you know, gangs and this, that. But I think that the key for me is that it just happened. And I was just open to it happening. I wasn't in resistance to my life. That's what unfolded. I didn't plan that, you know, to a larger extent. It's like I put myself in the right place and it happens.
And
It's
then
just being open to life.
to the other, how can we call it, the many different paths that you went on. I mean, I heard it somewhere that you've lived the life of 10 people in one life and you're still living.
Yeah, I'm having a good time too. Now, so I didn't see them as paths.
Okay.
I saw them as a journey. So I brought to the yogic type thing, and there's a whole story how all that happened. I didn't plan it. And then when I finished that cycle, I'm still meditating. I'm understanding the yogic way. And then I'm moving into, after a 40-day fast, into studying the Torah and going to my roots. It's like, it just happened. And Native American, the same thing. I wasn't trying to do anything. I was just having a good time. I really like doing the Sundance.
Mhm.
So I don't see it as a
don't
path.
just dabble here and dabble there. I mean, you immerse yourself completely
That's right.
into whatever area you happen to be.
And that's a way of living that it's like living at optimal intensity,
Mhm.
whether I'm playing football or doing the Sundance or meditating 6 hours a day. It's a choice to live at optimal, you know, intensity.
Mm.
And that was good. It's a good perception because that's the key. So it doesn't really matter what you're doing, but it matters that it's optimal and it's fun. My advice to everyone on the spiritual path: you should be having a good time, or you're not. Something's not right.
Mm. That's good advice. Mm. All right, so let's go on with some other questions I've got here. What are the 6 foundations?
So that's part of the way of life, and I kind of looked at there's this religion and that religion, and it's like, how do I help people who are not interested in religion? So I looked at the things that are kind of common. So we looked at the eating, and I talked about eating to become a superconductor of the divine. And I saw that a plant-based or vegan diet, particularly a live food diet, was the most powerful way to activate my physical body. Then the second part is building what I call prana, breathing exercises and the yoga asanas, and I love the dance. Okay, so builds the prana. Okay, well, that's really important. So you got the physical body of building prana, service and charity, which I like to do, but also opens the heart. You start really connecting to people a different way when you're serving them. Less so with charity, but when you're serving, when you're interacting, with them. I mean, one time I was in Nigeria, in Owerri, which is the starving children. People kind of hear that. That's Owerri, actually. That's the actual name. Instead of Biafra. Biafra was the old name. So I'm there. I'm seeing all these Jewish stars, and I'm thinking, what is going on here? Well, I was staying in the tribal leader's house, who's really now the local king, and I said, what is this about? He said, well, we're one of the lost tribes. Wow. So immediately I felt that connection with him. And so but they didn't know much about the Jewish world. So I did a shamanic Shabbat, and all the tribal leaders from the 13 different tribes that he was head of, sub-tribes, they all came to a Shabbat. They'd never been to one before. And so it all integrates that way. And that's the service and charity. It's you're connected at the heart to that's key to the whole thing. And then working as for me, being a student, and working under a spiritual teacher is the fourth, and fifth is as much meditation as possible, which I love to do, and repeating the name of God, and then as much awakening of the spiritual energy. So I never missed the time not to get Shaktipat from Swami Muktananda. I never missed the time. If I had to travel literally 200 miles to get there. So that's the 6 foundations. And then with that is the sevenfold peace. Similar, you want to take care of your body, peace with the body, peace with the mind, meditating, and then peace with the family. What's that about? Well, sacred relationship. And to me, particularly as a family therapist and a couple therapists and psychiatrists, relationship, sacred relationship, is actually a spiritual path. Literally a spiritual path, if you see it that way and you approach it that way. So when I marry people, I'm saying, if you choose, this is the spiritual path. This is a way of waking up spiritually, if you choose to see it that way. And then peace with the community, we've seen that. And then in the Native American world, we say Om Takiasa, peace with all the rock people and the living earth, in other words, the plant people, the animal world, and the human world and culture, and then peace with the living ecology. Now, what does that mean? Well, I'm not a environmentalist. I am one with the living planet. Very different. I'm not separate from the planet. So this is a way of experiencing your oneness with creation. And it's slightly different, but that's the spiritual ecology, and then peace with God. So it's all, all those different levels of interfacing with the world in a way that turns it into a spiritual experience. And that awareness is then what is the way of life that I'm talking about, that continues to expand your consciousness.
Amazing.
That was a mouthful.
Mentioned, something. I wanted to ask you a question about diet. You say something about following a vegan live diet. How would you explain?
No cooking.
That? Oh, no cooking.
Well, so
cooking. So everything is raw? You mean?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to say 98% raw. Everything's.
So
the reason
and
that
I
it's
see
important is
between
when you
primordial consciousness and having the primordial meals like our ancestors.
yes,
You know,
yes,
they ate raw.
exactly.
Okay.
That's a nice way to put it. I actually hadn't put it that way before, but that's exactly right.
Yeah.
It's good.
Wow.
And I explain the whole evolution in my book, Into Nothing. I explain how these steps unfolded for me. And that was part of the purpose of writing the book, is really as a spiritual teacher.
It makes sense because if you have understanding of energy, you know, the source of energy, the purest form of energy that's not been doctored in any way is live. It comes, you know, raw from the tree, from the plant, from the roots, wherever, and that's the energy, the essence of, I suppose, divinity, in a way. You're
Yes.
talking about energy, the source. It's we humans that have decided that we want to make things different and create our own version of divinity. I guess that's what all the religions have tried to do, in a way.
Well, that's also where they limit it.
Yeah,
Because the
exactly.
minute you have a box or a definition, you're
Mm,
not in that expansion.
mm,
And God, the divine, is all about expanding into the nothing.
mm,
And the six foundations, sevenfold peace, are just a way of living that allows that expansion to happen.
mm.
Because it's outside the box, but it's just a way of living. And that takes it away where I'm practicing meditation or I'm doing this. You're just living, doing these different things that create a bigger experience.
Mm. Tell me, what are some of your extraordinary mystical experiences?
Well, let me think how to say that. The simplest is as it began in India. As I meditated, like at that 6 hour day level, I really, yes, I had visions of the different gods and goddesses. That's astral plane, but there's a place where you really begin to disappear. But you're also experiencing the truth of who you are. You're experiencing what we call the self. And I call it non-causal joy, no cause, non-causal peace, non-causal love, no causal compassion. It is who we are. It's the truth of who we are. And all those different inner experiences composite the bigger picture. And then we realize we're even beyond that. But our normal daily life as that no cause. Well, I'll explain it in relationship. People get very dependent on each other and think the other person is the cause of your happiness. Causes a lot of difficulty. But if you understand that that light of God is within you, and the other person just adds to it, that's a very different relationship because you're not dependent on them, and therefore you can be in a much healthier relationship.
And what about this term you used when you're meditating and you just disappear? How would you describe that to, let's say, somebody who's just a novice without them freaking out?
Okay, so the first step of meditation is just creating a quiet mind. Okay, and this yoga chirti virti nirodha. Yoga is decreasing the activities of the mind. So that's the first step, and that's what most people are focused on. How do I create a quiet mind? And then the way I would explain it, the way I do explain it, but that's just step one. There's another step, going beyond the mind. There's still a you, but you're going beyond the mind to a whole different level of consciousness. And then the final part is where you go beyond that, where you disappear, and there's just that. There's just God. So there's steps of it. And so people see it as a progression, then they can get a better handle on it.
Would it be safe to say then that, to use other terminology that some people may understand, is that when you go, first of all, to get that place of peace in your meditation, you can go further, and that part is where you're no longer focusing on peace or trying to find peace or have relaxation, but you're able to kind of move beyond to a place that you're no longer preoccupied by your ego or your physical being, and you've moved to that place that is closer to God, which is the greater allness, if that's a good word, the allness of everything and nothing together. I like to say neither here nor there, but everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it's well said. Basically, I don't really start with I start with a general intent. But I don't really even start with trying to quiet my mind. It just where you go as you repeat the mantra, and then the mantra disappears and you disappear. So it's like you take one step and then you're kind of in the process. That's the way I would look at it. Now, that's not where people start. Okay, but once it's there, it just, your mind lets go. And if you're doing it every day or 6 hours a day, your mind lets go. And then you go there very quickly, within minutes.
I guess with practice, it becomes much more second nature. Where you just
Second nature, because it is who you are. It's a deeper part of who you are. You should go there.
I'd like to
But
ask.
you don't try to go there. You don't try to go there. It's just what happens.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, like you say, are so caught up in the first step of just trying to, calm the mind with so much distraction going on in the third dimension. It's almost like that's the biggest struggle.
And see, when you struggle, you're in opposition to yourself. And so what I advise people is, I say, just repeat the name. Whatever happens, happens. But don't fight it. The joke about don't think of a monkey when you go into meditation. And then that's all you're thinking about is a monkey.
Yeah.
It's like, no, just get started, repeat the mantra, and don't worry about anything else. See what happens. Because you're not going anywhere, because that's where the ego gets in the way.
You're not going anywhere. That's a really, it's simple but profound. I mean, the idea, I think a lot of people feel is that they're going on some kind of a voyage, but it's really not a voyage physically anyway. You're not going anywhere. Your body stays put. The body does not disappear. It just becomes less important. It's there, it's there, it's safe, it's going to be there when you come back, but your actual spiritual voyage is not something you can measure in terms of human yardsticks or, measuring sticks. You can't, right? I mean, it's not measurable in terms of the three-dimensional types of
that takes you out of the ego because you're not trying to measure it. No ego, no measurement, no ego.
Yeah. That's really important. Yeah. So you just sort of say, go with the flow.
Yeah.
And say, don't have any expectations. Put yourself into that peaceful place every day. And eventually you're going to go further and further into an understanding, but it's more of an experience, right? It sounds to me like what you're talking about here is experiential. It's not
Yes.
a logistical kind of rational, cognitive kind of
Not
understanding.
at all.
Not
Not at all.
Not at all. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, experiential. Wow, I kind of like what you're talking about here. This is my kind of stuff, like experiential. What else is important? I mean, really, the mind gets in the way, doesn't it? As
See,
Viktor Frankl said, lose your mind and come to your senses.
right.
Uh,
That's a
very
nice way to say
wise.
it. That's a good way. That's good.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So what are we here on the planet for? Are we here to make lots of money? Are we here to get married? No, to me, we're only here to know God.
Mm,
We're
mm,
not going anywhere because that's not anywhere.
mm. And the knowing is experiential.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Very,
Definitely.
yeah, I get that.
Way beyond the mind
Yeah, yeah.
and intellect.
So let's go back to your experience in India. You spent 7 years there, I believe, and as usual, totally immersed. And you had an experience with the Hindu goddess Lakshmi. How did that impact your female-male balance?
Um, Actually, Lakshmi showed up when I was in Petaluma, California. I mean, I had other experiences. And I'm
Mm,
just sitting there meditating, right? Doing a little fire ceremony, and then suddenly she appears. And then she moves towards me and very physical, very real, and physically merges with me. Now, why is that important? Because from that point on, I had taken on, in essence, the internal feminine aspects. So there was a rebalancing from the masculine into, wait, I just took on Lakshmi. I mean, she merged with me and gave me her gifts of woman. And so there was Lakshmi more than just woman, Lakshmi super woman, so to speak. And that literally transformed me. It transformed my consciousness and really more than that. So that's how it went. It was like, oh, I'm not really being politically correct. Lakshmi shows up and merges with me and transforms me, and just here it is. This is what the energy of woman on the spiritual plane, and now it's in you.
mm,
That was pretty mind blowing.
mm. I must have been. Wow. And you've also had several interactions that imbued you with the energetic of universal love.
Yeah.
Would that be one of them that you just described? Is that kind
Yes.
of
But
energy?
yeah, once meditating in a cave in Israel, actually overlooking the Dead Sea, I was doing a 3-day just without food and water, just being there. Abraham appeared, and he transmitted the energy of just pure love. So it said Abraham had the tents open in all 4 directions so he could receive everyone. And so when he appeared, that was a more pure experience of this kind of cosmic love. Yes, with Lakshmi, but that has a particular part to it, the feminine part. So she, I took on the sacred feminine from her, but it was Abraham, it was just pure love energy. And so for me, the astral plane where these beings appear is very real. I'm not thinking about it. I certainly wasn't trying with Lakshmi or Abraham. They just happened. Maybe I was open to it just happening, but they give their gifts. They give their gifts of consciousness in different ways. That's kind of the key to that.
Would it be safe to say that when you describe female-male balance and universal love, it might be good to explain it as being male being the positive, female the negative, positive, negative, like a currency, electrical charge, that of course was something that was developed about 100 years ago, or more, about more than 150 years ago. The negative positive currency, AC, would it be like that energy? Would you say that's a good way to describe it as well? That there is that.
I think in relationships, I write it in my book, Into the Nothing. I talk about the male-female polarity is needed, that energy to have energy in the relationship. If you're just the same, there's no polarity. There isn't enough polarity to create that energy. So a healthy relationship has that polarity, so that you can have the polarity and the energy from that. What I experienced with Lakshmi, there wasn't a polarity. She just merged with me and gave me it all.
Okay. Yeah, because the way I see it, look like, of course, Nikola Tesla was able to make the currency much more efficient when he had the binary aspect of the male and
Yes.
positive. And it's almost like you're affirming that if we can, use them, just using that as an analogy to what you're explaining there, it's a much more pure, divine connection that you have when you have that kind of polarity, not only with other people, but within yourself. If you're going to have a
Well, that's what happened, because she gifted me with that energy, and that merged the male and female within myself. Because we have that, but we're often blocked. We're often kind of like at odds with both those qualities. Whereas for me, after the experience, it's like, well, this is just one. This is just what it is to be alive.
Yeah. We in the West, we tend to be in opposition, right? There's that
Right.
polarity. It's either good or bad, right? You're either a good person or a bad person, and it's negative or positive, and that continues today, certainly in mainstream arenas, and people are caught in that bind between never accepting themselves because they don't know what to do with all those negative impulses. But what I hear from you is the importance of integration, taking all of that and saying, hey, what I'm getting here is who I am. I need to embrace the negative and the positive, the female,
Yes.
male.
Yes.
That's the divine.
Right.
And then that, I guess, leads to the next question. What does it mean to serve God with joy?
Spiritual joy, which we call simcha, is fundamental to spiritual life. In the kind of more mystical Jewish teaching, the teaching is you can't be depressed to know God, because depression separates you. Okay. So it's a fundamental quality that brings you into the joy of God. But if you start with depression, you never get there because it's a wall. So spiritual joy is fundamental to spiritual life. And it comes from within. It's not like you're making it up, but it's something you want to kind of amplify, and that opens your heart to the heart of God.
And you add ways that people can do that. One of them, a major part, I'm assuming, is how you eat to become a superconductor of the divine.
Mm-hmm.
There's that electrical
Yeah,
superconductor.
that's exactly what we're talking about. And when your body is sensitized, you're turned on, literally turned on, and then you're able to access the joy that's there. The joy is always there, but when you're sensitized, the inner world is able to radiate out.
Couple more questions here before we wrap this up, this fascinating interview. I'm telling you, I'd love to go on forever. You don't experience fear. Why is that?
There's nothing to fear. There's only God. I didn't grow up that way, if you understand what I mean, but at a certain point, there's only God. What is there to fear? Where are you going?
So you obviously don't see God as being up there in the clouds and sending thunderbolts and electrical charges to people who have sinned.
No, not exactly, no.
Still, there's a lot of people who believe that. A lot of religions are still preaching that. It's really a shame. But yeah, no fear. Why have fear? Yeah, I mean, it's only the physical part of us that in the end goes away. But we continue on.
And the truth is that physical part isn't really who we are. We need to take care of it.
Yes.
I'll do my push-ups and I'll do this. I want it working well, but it isn't really who we are. So what's your fear? Because you can't lose what you never had.
Wow. Well said. So final question here.
You ask good questions. You ask good questions. I'm enjoying it. Go ahead.
Oh, I love your answers. I mean, it's like a flow, right? I mean, we just go from one to the next, and it's, you know, when life is lived that way, I'm sure you will totally agree, there's no resistance. And the same thing is true with an interview, it just flows. There's no
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm sure I have a list of questions, but as you notice, I'm not necessarily following every question this way or that way. It's sort of like more of a guide, and I go with what happens in how you answer, etc. Yeah. And so, Dr. Gabriel Cousens, you've been wonderful. I'm going to ask a couple more questions, and then you're going to tell me about how people can explore the holistic liberation way with you. Final question. You are stronger, more flexible, and have more endurance than you were as a 20-year-old captain of an undefeated college football team and National College Football Hall of Famer. How has that happened?
I'm not sure. But one way it has happened is I never didn't hold on to the idea that with age you're going to contract down and get weaker. See, that's a mindset. If you don't have that mindset, then you don't do that. If your mindset is I'm getting stronger, which is the case, and more flexible, then that's where and a whole other experience of life. And the way people can kind of get it, I mean, like this interview is very good in helping communicate the energy. My book, Into the Nothing, it is a living example of that. It's not a lecture. I tried to stay away from lecturing or talking. It was like, here's my experience. And that's the key. So Into the Nothing gives an example of that whole way of life with all the teachings that you eventually get, not intellectually, but you eventually get by living that way. And people can get it at any bookstore, or they can go to drcousens.com. I have lots of classes. This weekend, I guess a day or two now, I have a meditation intensive where I'm giving the Shakti pod. And, we do that once a month. And then twice a week, I have one called Alive with Dr. Gabriel, where we kind of talk about different things. And then Shakti Spaces, Shakti Hours, where people have an opportunity to do spiritual questions and get some answers, because people really are curious. They want to know what's going on. And then we have spiritual fast. It's a little different now, doing it over the internet, of course, but it works. You can do it. And then I have what we call Jnana Yoga, or Yoga of the Mind course as well. And all those things are this constant play of teaching and interacting, which is fun for me and for the students in that way. So that's how people can really access it. They can go to drcousens.com, and that will take them to all my lectures and videos and everything like that. And also how to go further. Take a meditation intensive. Get the Kundalini awakened. That's how
Well,
that
Dr.
works.
Cousens, I want to thank you very much for this very interesting and informative interview, and the answers that you've given people is definitely going to help them on their own path and spiritual way. And I'm going to put all those links up below on YouTube, as well as at the end of this broadcast. There'll be a little title page with all your information. Thank you. Namaste.
Namaste. Thank you. It was fun talking to you.